Congressman Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Feinberg, thank you for your willingness to serve. You know, in listening to some of the rhetoric about this subject on the other side of the aisle, one would think, if one knew nothing, that Congress and the federal government just have this irrational compulsion to interfere in the private sector and arbitrarily set compensation limits. Well, what's your understanding of why your job was created, Mr. Feinberg?
My job was, it's clear, my job was created by Congress and the Treasury to establish compensation determinations designed with one primary objective in mind, to get the taxpayers' money back. And that is the primary objective. Now, how we do that...
Mr. Feinberg, I understand that, and thank you. But why? Did something go wrong? Why did we decide on these 7 companies?
These are the 7 companies that were allowed, I guess, to survive on the back of the taxpayers' willingness to contribute these funds.
So the private sector, the free market, in fact, had failed. Is that correct?
Correct.
Let's take one of the 7 companies you oversee, AIG. The largest corporate quarterly loss in American history was in the last quarter of last calendar year, and it was none other than AIG. Is that correct?
Correct.
And AIG has been the big recipient of bailout funds? Is that correct?
I think yes, that's correct.
So it had the largest loss and the largest single taxpayer bailout in American history. Is that correct?
Correct.
Does the public have any interest at all in wanting to see some kind of rational compensation limits in a company that is bailed out, the biggest in its history?
Insofar as the public's view is reflected by the statute that I'm working under, yes.
Does that seem a rational concern on our part to you?
No.
You think it's not rational?
I think it is. It's a rational response to the crisis.
In
yes.
protecting the public's interest?
Yes.
Thank you. Let me ask you this question. One of the 4 broad mandates that Congress gave you in creating the statute that created the special master was to review prior payments. When your office reviewed prior payments to senior executives in AIG, what did you find? Because presumably you found something wrong in the fact that you've chosen to roll back some of that compensation.
With most of the companies, we found that prior to the enactment of the law, there had been prior payments actually made. There was nothing nefarious or illegal about it. Those were contracts that were entered into prior to the enactment of the statute creating my office. What we did find going forward under my tenure, we did find that there were pending payments that were obligated to be made under prior contracts, and we were able, through negotiation with the companies, in almost every respect except 2 or 3 cited earlier, to get those contracts voluntarily invalidated. And instead, we rolled the amounts that were involved in those contracts into prospective performance-based stock.
Performance-based. Yes. When you looked at compensation, prior compensation, and in your report you're submitting today, looking forward, I assume that there's some rational basis for your coming up with the recommendations you came up. For example, we've heard some rhetoric here today that would seem to suggest that the sky's the limit. We have no business even talking about limiting executive compensation, even in companies we've bailed out. And you agreed that within some reason, any limit is arbitrary.
I think that's right. I mean,
but would you not agree, however, if I said the CEO's compensation in Company X ought to be 200% of Company X's entire profit for the year, that would be an irrational compensation, would it not?
I think it probably would.
So it's not entirely arbitrary.
Oh no, it's not. Our decisions weren't arbitrary. Our decisions absolutely were based, I think, were based on a reasonable evaluation of the data and the anecdotal information we received from the institution, these 7 companies. I would defend my report as being not at all arbitrary, but very, very principled, very rational, and very reasonable. Now, people may disagree, but I think it is clearly a reasonable and defensible report that was submitted to the Secretary.
And you used the words performance-based. Could you just elaborate on that? Because that's where we get into the rational or arbitrary here. It's tied to some kind of rational expectation of financial performance on the part of the company. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. We rejected out of hand the notion that regardless of company performance, there should be guaranteed salaries, guaranteed bonuses, guaranteed commissions, guaranteed perks, guaranteed, guaranteed, guaranteed. And what we said in our report, and what I recommended, is that the era of the compensation guarantee is over. And instead, other than small cash-based salaries, the remainder of the compensation package should be tied to performance, and not only tied to company performance, but tied to company performance over a period of time, so that you cannot simply short the stock, sell it after a year, roll it over. You've got to hold it for up to 4 years. And then we're hoping the long-term benefit of holding that stock will tie the officials' compensation to the overall value of the company as reflected in the stock. In addition, one other point, we also offered up the notion of longer-term incentive-based stock in addition to salary. But that stock cannot be redeemed. It cannot be sold until and unless the taxpayers get their money back. That's the formula we tried to use to correct what we thought in our report were the problems with executive compensation practices in these 7 companies.
I thank you, and my time is up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Right.